Hi everyone, nice to be here. Today we are going to talk about the successful startups. What's the most secret sauce to be a successful startup? And also, does corporate governance create or destroy value? My name is Kevin. I am a co-founder and CEO at Passbolt. Passbolt is a open source password manager designed to be DevOps first. So it is optimized to be used by developers and implemented in any type of infrastructure. And with me is Jérôme, founder and partner at Expon. Jérôme, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Kevin, nice to be with you today. Really cool to spend some time with you on this show here at TechChill. I'm one of the co-founders of Expon Capital. We're a venture firm based in Luxembourg. We invest from seed stage all the way to series, F is the latest one we've done. Across the whole spectrum. And what we look for typically is, companies that have a great ambition, unicorn style, but that are going to have a very big impact on society. And so we measure that by addressing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that's about me and my firm.
Great, thanks, Jerome. So the conversation of today, let me start with the fact. We are in 2021, and I really feel like since the beginning of the year, we see almost every week a new unicorn arriving in the market. From the outside, it seems so easy. What's the secret sauce? What would you say about that?
Well, Kevin, I would ask you, does a unicorn, a €1 billion company typically look like a €5 million seed stage startup? And probably doesn't, and why not? What's different? And I think that the fact that a unicorn is going to handle a lot of money and substantial projects require, a very important social currency, and that is trust. So signaling the trust, I think, is critical. And trust takes typically the form of symbols, the people, the language being used by the firm, and then the processes, of course. So in my opinion, it's all about growing up. Kindergarten, way back when we were there, it really didn't look like, the typical university campus, right? And in class, it's not the same thing either. So I think that, there's big differences in terms of maturity. That's probably, I think there is a recipe for success, such as when there is a recipe to grow from kindergarten to university.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with what you just said. And I think the metaphor you're using between the kindergarten and the university works well. Because the way I see the main difference between a seed stage company and a unicorn is actually its level of maturity, which is the same between a kindergarten and a university, actually. And maturity takes time to build. So I always like to compare the way startups work with a football team. It's not because you put a bunch of A-League players in the same team that they are actually going to perform, right? It takes much more than that. Experience plays a big role, but it also takes time and practice so that their game actually reaches the right level of maturity. So, and apart from the players, so the players are important. You need A-League players, but apart from that, you also need other type of people to make this team perform, like the coaches, the coordinators, the strategists. And it's only when all these talents work together that they will achieve success. So I would say that in a startup, it's the same thing. It's for a startup to perform at its peak, it needs to be the right team. And I'm sure you will agree on that, because the first thing VC say when they are asked, how do you select which startups to invest in? VCs tend to always say it's the team. It's always the team first. So yes, the team is important, that's for sure. But also to play at the right level to make the startup as successful as it can be, you need the right level of maturity. And this is where actually governance plays a big role.
Yeah, it's all about the evolution of the team, right? And so we typically pick the kind of team that we feel has that appetite to grow and evolve as managers, and they have the ambition to build something really big, and they know that they can't do it alone, right? So I get it. It's important, what we're talking about, but why do we even bother, to talk about governance? Because, isn't that supposed to be super straightforward? You call your board every once in a while, you do your show, and, that's it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we do, right? No, I wish that was the case, but we all know good governance is good governance is hard. It's super hard. It's actually something I've been discovering myself since Passbolt. It's really interesting, and because it's hard, people get actually paid pretty big money for that, right? And it's not out of the blue. It's because it creates enormous value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's super hard, and I think we'll talk about why it's so hard in the next minutes. But also I think we need to be very candid and be very honest. The life of a CEO is probably not the easiest job in the world. I'm a former entrepreneur. Who has never been stressed to death? And why did Ben Horowitz write The Hard Thing About Hard Things? And if anyone here in the audience has read that book, you understand that we all are living the same shit. So I think that this is really hard, right? And we all need to be supportive of each other. So governance is one of the, let's say, the ingredients in this sauce to make success. But Kevin, can you tell us what corporate governance means for you? What is it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, well, it's a pretty vast question, but I'll try to summarize how I see it. For me, I would say above all, it's a framework. It's a framework that ensures proper company control, stewardship, and probably leadership. It's a tool that is actually provided to the founders and to the company to optimize the way the company functions, to optimize the strategy. It also creates opportunities. And I would say governance also helps detect bottlenecks or possible risks, malfunctions inside the company. So of course, my experience of founder, for a first-time founder, I would say implementing governance, implementing a board inside your startup can be intimidating. It can be perceived as a burden. And it's only with time that founders actually perceive the value that can be created from it. They start realizing, hey, I would never have thought about this thing. Or, oh my God, there was this risk, we didn't see it. It's only because this board member is experienced and we have created this relation of trust that these points are actually coming in the conversation. Personally, from my own experience, now I see great value in having a governance that is rightly implemented. But initially, it took time for me and for us, the founders, to perceive this value. What is it for you? How would you define governance from your perspective?
Well, you know my reputation. Some people call me the professor. I guess there's got to be a reason for that. And for me, it's a set of principles and processes that guide the behavior of corporate bodies who are responsible for where a company is going. So where a company is going. So it typically involves management, it involves board members, and it involves shareholders at the shareholder meeting. So that's the concept. But in other words, corporate governance tells board members how they should behave.
Okay.
And I think that today, just for the purpose of the focus, we're just going to dedicate the conversation to the board of directors, because that's where most of the action is. If you agree,
Yes.
I think that's the most valuable one for everyone listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Kevin, let me ask you now about what you see as the role of the board. Where does it start? Where does it end?
First, I would say that in a startup, having regular board meetings. So, as I said, I think initially for any founder, it's a painful process when you don't see value for it. But what you realize soon enough is that the value created by it is that it forces you as founders or as managers of the company to take a step back. It's like when your board meetings are coming, you have to think about what are we going to discuss with the board, what metrics are we going to base our decisions on, and what happened maybe in the last 1 to 3 months, depending on the frequency of your board meeting. Did we achieve enough? Are we aligned with the priorities we set to ourselves? So,
and can you tell how you to the audience? I mean, how do you approach the fact that sometimes you can be below your numbers? I mean, for the record, Passbolt is a pretty good company, and so they're very rarely below. They're typically above what they said, but it has happened in a number of occasions where for some KPIs you're below. So aren't you afraid? Oh, I'm below the budget. How do you what is the reaction? You sort of fear that you're going to go to the board, or you're like, okay, well, it is what it is, and let's discuss with the board why it is like that and what we can do to improve things. What's going on in your head?
I've already seen the kind of relationship we have with the board as a marriage. It's like when you enter into a marriage, right? You know that this is going to last for a certain amount of time. Well, marriage is supposed to be forever, but with a startup, it's different. But apart from that, there needs to be trust and there needs to be transparency. I don't see any board of directors be fully functional without these two components, trust and transparency. And if you have trust and transparency, it means that you can actually walk in to your board meetings and not be scared. Like, they are not your parents. They're not going to scold you the same way like your wife should understand what you are telling to her and not like judge you. So with your board members is the same. It's more of a discussion. It's more like explaining what is the situation. Okay, this is where I stand with my metrics, and this is the problems that we are facing. And the logical answer from them should be, okay, how can we help? Let's dig in the details. Let's try to understand what is happening right now that you are not achieving your targets, and let's find a solution together. So it's a pretty positive and constructive approach. So yes, to answer your question, I think it's normal for a first-time founder or for a founder who is having a board of directors for the first time to be intimidated and to think, I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to present my metrics and I'm going to be scolded because we haven't delivered what we said that we would deliver. I think this is normal to think like this initially. But if you have done a good job at choosing your investors, choosing your board members, this situation should not arise.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree with you on pretty much everything you said. this transparency is critical. And so we try and put entrepreneurs, founders at ease by telling them, we know budgets are science fiction, especially at seed stage or Series A, and except maybe for the cost part of and the OPEX, that should be controlled. But the top line, I mean, who knows, right? So what I like to say as well is that the board is not a forum where the CEO is going to pitch the company like to a new investor or to customers, and unfortunately it happens all the time, and it's boring as hell. Because we're board members. We're there to help, and we're not here to do clap and say, hey, great, you're so great and you're so amazing and you didn't miss any numbers, or that's not the purpose of the exercise. If we have to work together to create value, I think what board members need to do is create the safe environment that you describe, where the CEO and the other founders, they feel confident in the fact that they can be authentic and they can show that they can be vulnerable. They don't have all the answers because, by the way, the other members don't have the answers as well. I mean, we can help, and we may have some of the answers, or let's say ideas to come to the right decision. But we don't know everything, right? And it's together that we can find the right way to go about it.
Absolutely. I would even add that if this team cohesion is happening right, as a founder, you should almost get excited, when your board meeting happens, because basically you know that you are going to find solutions, you know that you are going to have insights, and it should make you excited. It's not always the case. I would say the drawback is that it creates a bit of preparation. So obviously, if you want your board meeting to happen in the right way, you need to document it, you need to think it through in advance. But this preparation is really worth the time, because you will get value in return.
I agree with you, and I think that's probably one of the most underestimated aspects of the whole process. It's taking sufficient time, because let's be clear as well. I mean, you guys are always, and you're in the driving seat, and you're driving 300 kilometers per hour, so you don't have a lot of time and space in your life to do these kinds of things. Unfortunately, it's a mistake not to make the time. And I would be happy to see more entrepreneurs be diligent in preparing their meetings. As an entrepreneur, one of the aspects where I was probably cautious talking to the board and VCs is, I'm the founder. I know where I want to lead this company. So why should I listen to people that have no clue about what I want to do and this business that I know inside out? And I think this comes from maybe a sense of insecurity at the same time. I mean, it's overconfidence mixed with insecurity. That I think it takes a bit of, I don't know if it's age. At least for me, it took a while. For some, we see some young entrepreneurs like you who don't need to be that old to get to that level of maturity. But it takes, I think, some courage to get to that point.
Yeah, that's for me. It's maturity is really the key word. That you said it right. It's a bit of experience, adjustment, being ready to listen. So we mentioned a lot of things. We mentioned identifying blinding spots, probably spotting conflicts of interest for the board members.
Ensuring you're talking about the added value, right, of the board.
Yes. So it sounds So this is the theory. I mean, there are so many books available online, so much documentation, and the theory always sounds extremely precise. But my question for you is, like, in practice, is this always that clear cut? And the reason I'm asking this question is that as founders, we meet a lot of other entrepreneurs, a lot of other founders, and we hear a lot of crazy stories out there, like board members trying to micromanage the CEO, to hijack board meeting, or even sometimes broking decision processes just because they can do it, or because sometimes opinions can diverge. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good point, Kevin. I think that so we're seeing less and less of that. I think it still exists out there. We need to be very careful, and I think that good VCs should be helpful and supportive, and let's say creating the kind of board environment where that kind of thing doesn't happen. I think that a lot of the people that are going to be on the board, and most people that are going to be on the board of a company, they have a natural tendency to be in the action because they have been entrepreneurs themselves. So their DNA is to boom, get in the action. There's you push a button and it's in their DNA, right? So they don't mean bad, but they know how to do some things because they've done it in the past. And of course, they find themselves in that position where they shouldn't, but they mix, let's say, their own life as an entrepreneur with their role as a board member, which is totally different, where they should not be doing that, of course. So I think that's one of the it's not even a cognitive bias, but it's one of the tendencies that needs to be managed. I think professional VCs, I think it's become pretty rare to see that kind of thing. But with some business angels, I think it still happens because of that sort of human nature. I think there's a lot of other challenges. I was talking about the cognitive biases. I think we're affected, according to researchers, by above 100 cognitive biases. None of us comes into any conversation neutral or objective. That doesn't exist. We always come loaded by stuff in the background, and that's our history, right? That's in our database, right? Whenever something pops up, we are pre-programmed. We pre-programmed ourselves to have some sort of reaction. So we have those biases, and in terms of decision making, when we're around the table and the board, it means that people are affected by around 20 cognitive biases for decision making. What it means effectively is we're almost like, there's, I don't know if it's a board of 5 people, there's, people from 5 different planets. So it's kind of an intergalactic conversation. And unless you have the babblefish, you can't make sense of it. So I think failing to recognize those biases is, and actively so, during every board meeting, several times during the board meeting, means that there's going to be misunderstandings, there can be tensions, and ultimately there can be bad decisions. So we need to be keenly aware of that.
It's a very complicated exercise, I think, because what you are describing, I would say, is like, in an ideal board meeting, everyone should be prepared to identify this bias, and this is true. But in early stage startup, when the founders are always like on the front line, fighting all sorts of things, jump into a board meeting. We are not trained to recognize this bias. We are not trained to understand the dynamics that are happening inside the team. And I think right now you just talked about the dynamic that is happening between the board members, but you have also the crazy dynamic that is happening internally inside the company, which can basically produce fake data points, not fake, but mistaken data points, which you bring to the board, and then that influence the decision, and all that can be misleading. And then you end up in a fifth dimension, because you end up having a board meeting where, there is already a bit of tension because of what happens internally. Maybe your data points are not exactly correct. And then you have all these biases happening around the table. You're like, okay, what the heck is going on here? How do you deal with that?
That's about, that's the big one of the big tasks of the board, I think, is to close the information gap. And that's, so the gap is huge. I mean, because you as a founder, you have the information, and you don't necessarily know everything that's true, and you don't necessarily know all the facts, but you could, and of course you're going to be biased, but the board members that are not executives, they won't know anything. So I mean, that's why I think it's so important. That's what happens typically in board meetings, is you have quite a bit of time spent in pretty much on a regular basis on defining the KPIs, redefining the KPIs, updating the KPIs, because we want to close the information gap. So allowing everyone to be part of the conversation as to, okay, are these the right metrics? What are the right metrics? How can we define the right metrics? How can we, all these questions that are conducive and helpful to reduce the information gap, they're very helpful. And one of the elements, of course, of that is that there's, typical overconfidence of management. So that's really well documented by research. And in terms of the forecast number, and we know that because there's, very rarely do we get budgets that get that get beaten by management, because the very nature of an entrepreneur is to be optimistic. So and it's not in bad faith. It's just the nature of any entrepreneur. And that's why I invest in entrepreneurs, right? If only they knew how hard it is, nobody would ever, do what they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. Great. I think we have only 2 minutes left. I can see from the clock. How can we conclude this talk? Any conclusion from your end regarding maybe governance in early stage startups?
I think it would be great if you could, share with the audience and the founders out there what your recommendations would be as to what they should be doing in terms of governance. Okay,
sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think it has to be dealt with the same process as entering into.
Stop.
Yes.
Can you say this? Can you say this one more time?
Trust and confidence need to be there, and to be there, you need to be on the same page. So to be on the same page is very important to ask each and everyone. What's your role? What are your values? What are the values of the company? Making sure that we understand each other, that we are aligned, also aligned on where we are going. You also,
by the way, I just want to, sorry for interrupting, to say to the audience, if you do that in your board, you ask everybody to write their role on a piece of paper, you're going to find out that each and every board member thinks they have a different role on the board, and so that's why it's really interesting what you're suggesting, Kevin. Yeah,
alignment is key. I see we are out of time, so I'll make it short. Then I would say you can don't hesitate to ask for help. This is very important. If you have a problem, the board needs to know it, and not because you have to tell them, but because they can create value for you. Then finally, I would say you can promote diversity. It is very tempting to invite in your board people who only think like you. Will always have a positive vote, when you suggest something, but this is actually counterproductive. What you need is people who are going to challenge your thoughts, challenge your strategy, tell you that maybe you're wrong. And this only comes with diversity, and diversity creates value. So yeah, this would be my conclusion and recommendations. What do you think of it?
I think, I think you're absolutely right. I would add maybe one thing. It's this concept of fair process leadership that is not well known. And what it means is in order to be successful and to create the best and the fastest outcomes and to prevent a lot of pain in the company is to apply fair process leadership. What it is it's about acting fairly and in a transparent way. It's about giving everyone on board a chance to take part in the decision-making process. And as an example, you're talking about specific point on the agenda of the board meeting, and before the board, you start speaking with a number of people of the board. And then in the board meeting, you address the point, and then you don't let everyone participate. Not everyone was a part of the conversation before the board, and then you end up deciding what's been pre-decided. So, of course, that's not fair process leadership. What's going to happen is that the people that were not part of the conversation, they can end up feeling cast off. They can end up feeling that they're going to withdraw from being involved, right? So they're not going to be interested anymore. They will disengage. They will probably not reinvest if they're a VC. They will not want to support you in refinancing. They will not necessarily say good things. So because it wasn't fair, and there's many examples of processes that are not necessarily fair. And by the way, it doesn't mean that the people that are leading this unfair process want to be unfair, but sometimes it just happens because you have this conversation and you didn't involve other people. So I think it's one item that you should be very cautious about involving, everyone. And the last point about that is that typically we don't see that we are unfair, but we see that other people are unfair. So it's tricky, and that's why we typically encourage board members to be conscious and aware that fair process leadership is depends on the group.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I can definitely think of some examples, some situations that can make it happen to be unfair. Just a quick phone call to discuss about an idea or something can sometimes lead to quickly voted decisions during the board meeting. So absolutely. Great. Yeah. I think we're out of time, Jérôme. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the insights. Pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I hope it was enjoyable for the audience as much as it was enjoyable for us, and that it was useful as well, and that people recognize that that value gets created or destroyed in the board as well, and it's not only value creation is not only in the hands of the founders. There's a lot going on in the boards if you can use them. So use them, but don't abuse them.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Great. Thanks everybody.